Well, first of all, I just need to say a word to those of you who regularly join us for these Sunday Masses. I've really missed you. 3 weeks ago, I wasn't able to be here with you because I was at a parish Mass. And 2 weeks ago, we had our 22-hour power failure that blocked us off from being with you. And last weekend, I wasn't here because I had a chance to go and be with my family in Northern Virginia for a couple of days. It was a beautiful staycation. It was a time where we were able to watch several movies. We stayed at home, had some wonderful dinners, good conversations. But I got to tell you that the highlight of my time away with my family was to be with my two grandnieces, Abigail, who is 6, and Alex, who is 4. And while I was prepared for it on my way down to Virginia, I was thrilled when they both asked me if I would join with them in playing some games. For those of you who have little kids, you know what Zingo is all about, and red light, green light, and the Mexican train. First time I ever heard about those games, but delighted in it. But what I cherish the most about being with Abigail and Alex is that when they asked me to play, it was evident in their eyes. Evident in their eyes, and it meant so much to me. And I think that most of us would probably agree that maybe one of the pluses that we have about wearing masks is that it has really brought our attention to really focus on each other's eyes. Not simply color or the size of the eyes, but to realize what's in those eyes. Welcoming eyes, loving eyes, critical eyes, angry eyes, disinterested eyes. I was thinking about the fact that when I was in the first grade, my teacher, Sister Estelle, used to always teach us the eyes are the windows to the soul. And so today I think Jesus gives us, as he always does, an important lesson. But I think it's important for us to recognize the lesson that Jesus teaches us about our eyes. First thing I want to say is that something interesting about the gospel that Father Tom read to us, this is the only gospel miracle of Jesus that appears in all 4 gospels. And it's very important because in the end, as people look back on what Jesus did when he multiplied the loaves and the fishes so that more than 5,000 people could be fed, it was a trailer, a sneak peek of what was going to actually happen at the Last Supper, when Jesus instituted the Eucharist. And if you listen carefully to this particular passage from the Gospel of Matthew, it uses those 4 verbs that showed the actions of Jesus at the Last Supper. He took, blessed, broke, and gave. He took the fish and the loaves that were brought to him, and Matthew uses those 4 verbs. He took them, blessed them, broke them, and gave them. But all as a result of an encounter between the eyes of the people and the eyes of Jesus. All of us who have lost loved ones, know what grief does to us. And how much all of us want at those moments maybe to be by ourselves. To go to, into our own rooms or to go to a quiet place to kind of deal with the loss. And that's exactly where we find Jesus at the beginning of this gospel. He's just heard about the beheading of John the Baptist. And he was heartbroken. Not simply because John the Baptist was the one who was pointing the way to him, but because John the Baptist was his cousin, his flesh and blood. And so he's looking for a place when he can kind of think this all through, deal in a very human way with a very painful loss. And what does Matthew tell us? As he's on his way to go to that special place, lots and lots and lots of people are on his heels. They're coming to him. And they are hungry. And we can certainly be inspired that in his own need, Jesus put that need aside. He wasn't aggravated. He wasn't angry because of the people that were there. But Matthew tells us he looked at the people with his own eyes and saw theirs, and he looked at them with compassion. Kind of like the same look that I received from Abigail and Alex. A hopeful look. We need something. We want something. And that's precisely what the people were there. They wanted something from Jesus. They were hungry, and they were more than hungry for food. They were hungry for all that he was teaching. And in the end, Jesus not only satisfied their hunger by the multiplication of the loaves and the fish, but he did it in such an extraordinary, generous way. We know that Matthew tells us at the end how much food was left over that could be shared with those who weren't there. But the important part of it was there was a connection between the soul of Jesus and the souls of those people. And the eyes had it. The eyes showed the love and the concern that was in the heart of Jesus and for them. And so fast forward now to 2020. And as you and I take a look at this particular gospel, we can appreciate even more what the early Christian community saw when they reflected on this story and what happened at the Last Supper. And not only that, the early Christians, like ourselves, are called to see what happened way back in the Old Testament. We heard part of it today from the book of the prophet Isaiah, where God is promising to feed his people, and not simply to feed us with the food that holds our bodies together, but to feed us with what keeps our souls intact and on fire with the power of God's love. And we know that even in this very difficult time, that gift that the Lord came to give the 5,000, which was an anticipation of the real gift that he gave at the Last Supper, is ours to cherish more than any other gift that God has ever given to us. The gift of Jesus' body and blood is the penultimate gift that we could ever receive. It is the food for the journey. And whether or not we have the opportunity to receive the Holy Eucharist in person, as we're privileged to do so in this chapel, or not yet have the opportunity, as so many of you don't have that opportunity for one reason or another, we know that from the eyes of Jesus comes the same compassion he had for the people in the gospel for each of us. And he wants to look for and provide for us on that particular journey. And that's exactly what happens in this Mass. And that's why it's so good that all of you who are able to join us here for this great celebration, and that one day we can all hope that we'll be back together in all of our churches and be able to receive the Holy Eucharist, because it's a gift that we absolutely need, and it's a gift that Jesus absolutely wants to give us. But there's got to be another side to the gift that we're receiving. It's not just a gift that we take in, but it's a gift that we have to use to share, to use our own eyes with compassion for the needs of other people. As you and I were listening to that very first reading that Father Ken read to us from the book of the prophet Isaiah, I think that sometimes we have a misunderstanding of what the role of a prophet was. We sometimes think that the role of the prophet was simply to go and tell the people everything that they were doing wrong. Or maybe we've got this mistaken idea that the role of the prophet was somehow to predict what was going to happen down the road. But the main role of the prophet as an ambassador of God, as a mouthpiece of God, was this: that it was the role of the prophet to awaken in people's minds and hearts the desire to be with God always. And the role of the prophet was to help every single person that the prophet could meet, or every single person who would read about the prophets, that they likewise would hunger and thirst to be with God forever. And you know what? That wasn't just the job of Isaiah or Jeremiah or Ezekiel or any of the other people that we call prophets in the Old Testament. It's a role that we all have. And it's a specific part of the rite when we were baptized. We're called to be prophets. We're called to help each other come to God's kingdom in heaven. I already introduced you to Cheryl and Herb today. And you know, one of the important things to remember is that their marriage is a vocation. And all of you who are married, it's a vocation. And those of you who are single, that's a vocation. And those of you who are in consecrated life, that's a vocation. And those of us who are ordained, that's a vocation. And the way I always like to look at vocation is it's our ticket to getting to heaven. And not just ourselves. But we try to bring along with us as many people as possible. And today, Cheryl and Herb, we're just really grateful to the both of you. Because over the course of these last 40 years since you joined your hands and hearts as husband and wife, we know for sure you've been helping each other along the way to fall more deeply in love with God so that one day you'll both be with God in heaven. And I know you've been bringing an awful lot of other people with you. And so today we thank God for the both of you, for the love that's in your eyes, as we pray for all of us. That as we have we have the possibility of being able to look at other people's eyes when we're wearing our masks, we can see this as God's invitation that we see our eyes as windows of our souls. And that what needs to be in our souls is not only our hunger for God, but our hunger to help each other come with us to God's kingdom in heaven. May the great story we hear of Jesus' miracle today help us to appreciate so many miracles that come from the heart of Jesus out of compassion for us, but especially do we find ourselves grateful for all the sacraments, but especially for the sacrament of the Eucharist. So Cheryl and Herb, if you could please come to the altar.